Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for taking your seats. If the last could just sit down, that'd be great. Welcome, everyone, to the 2019 Annual General Meeting of Shareholders of Australian Wool Innovation Limited. As it's past 10 a.m, and as Chairman, I declare a quorum is present, and on advice of our share registry, Link Market Services, I declare that this annual general meeting is now open. I ask everyone present to register their attendance with Link Market Services outside the entrance door. If you have not yet registered, would you please do so now? I'm Colette Garnsey. I'm your Chairman, the Chairman of Australian Wool Innovation Limited. I would like to introduce to you the other directors of Australian Wool Innovation and the Chief Executive Officer who are seated in the front here with me. First of all, if I could please introduce David Webster, Don McDonald, Jock Laurie, James Morgan, Wal Merriman, and Meredith Shield. I'd like to introduce our Chief Executive Officer, Stuart McCulloch. And seated at the table with us today, of course, is our Company Secretary, Jim Story. Seated in the front row is Tracy Marshall, who is our Chief Financial Officer, and Simon James of HLB Mann Judd, who are the company's auditors. Ros Johnson, who is from our share registry, Link Market Services, will be the returning officer today for the agenda items that need to be voted on at this meeting. We also have our partner from our external lawyers present, Herbert Smith Freehills, and this is Quinton Digby. Good morning, Quinton. All of these people will be available for questions, if appropriate, and at the appropriate time during the course of the meeting. The notice of the meeting that was sent out to shareholders has been tabled by the Company Secretary and will be taken as read. The minutes of the previous annual general meeting of shareholders of Australian Wool Innovation Limited, held on the 23rd of November 2018, were approved by the board and signed by me, the Chairman. The original minutes are tabled by the Company Secretary, and there are copies of those minutes available for inspection should any shareholder wish to see them. I will now invite our Company Secretary, Jim Story, to outline the procedures of the conduct of the meeting today in accordance with the Constitution of the company. Jim.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'll now outline the rules for conduct of the meeting. These proceedings are being sound and video recorded, and they're also being broadcast live on our website at www.wool.com/AGM. The broadcast will be available to be viewed on the website for the 12 months following the AGM. All attendees are asked to turn off mobile phones during the meeting. The use of any camera equipment is not permitted during the meeting. Proxies. Link Market Services maintains the company's share register. Link has advised that 2,027 appointment of proxy forms were received by the closing time of 10 a.m. on Wednesday. There were 2,003 valid proxy forms lodged and 24 invalid proxy forms. The total of proxy voting rights represented is 330,368. The major reasons for any invalid proxy forms were that they were not signed or were incorrectly completed. And of course, any proxy forms received after the deadline on Wednesday were ruled invalid as they were received too late. The Chairman will report on open proxies to the Chair for each resolution at the relevant point later on. Questions? Only those shareholders, proxy holders and representatives with a white, yellow or pink card are able to speak and vote at this meeting. shareholders with a blue admission card are able to speak at the meeting. Visitors holding a red visitor card or a green media card are not entitled to speak or vote at the meeting unless permitted by the chair. During the meeting, the CEO and the chair will answer questions from shareholders if these are relevant to the meeting agenda. You are asked to keep your questions and comments regarding the financial reports of the company until after the presentation from the CEO. Please reserve any questions that are relevant to any other item on the agenda to the discussion of that item. Please ask one question only until all other shareholders have had an opportunity to ask a question. If time permits, we will then return to you if you have a further question to ask. When you wish to ask a question or make a comment, you should proceed to the microphone nearest to you and advise your name and show your white, yellow or pink voting card or blue admission card to the AWI officer at the microphone. The AWI officer will then announce your name to the meeting and the chairman will invite you to ask your question or make your comment. We also invite questions from those shareholders who may be viewing the meeting via the webcast on the AWI website. For those viewing the webcast, the Ask a Question facility is accessed by clicking the blue hand button at the top of the viewing screen. For verification purposes, if you did not already supply your shareholder reference number when you registered for the webcast, you must supply it in the Ask a Question facility. Your AWI shareholder number is the I-400 number on your proxy form, and it's also available on other correspondence you would have received in recent months. Time limits on questions and statements. Shareholders who wish to speak at the meeting are asked to keep their contributions concise and relevant to the item under discussion. Speakers are asked to speak for no more than 2 minutes so that all shareholders have an opportunity to participate in the meeting. Points of order. If a shareholder wishes to raise a point of order about any matter of procedure during the meeting, please proceed to the microphone nearest to you and advise your name and show your voting card to the AWI officer, and they will announce your name and the chairman will then invite you to raise your point. If a point of order is made while another shareholder has the floor, we'll ask that shareholder to resume their seat until the point of order has been dealt with. Introducing new motions. During the meeting, no person may move any resolution or an amendment to a resolution that is in a notice of meeting, except with the approval of the board or if the chair permits or it's required by law under the Corporations Act. Voting. This year we're going to streamline the way in which the voting is conducted. Voting on the board size limit resolution, which is item 3 in today's meeting, will be conducted by a show of hands and not by a poll. This is on account of the very large majority of votes cast in favour of this resolution as at the close of proxy voting. The chairman will be calling a poll for the resolutions in items 2 and 4 in a notice of meeting relating to changes to the Constitution and the director elections. Voting instructions for shareholders and proxy holders on the poll will be read out by the returning officer at the appropriate time. Another change for this year is that we will not take a break after each resolution and count the poll. Instead, the results of the poll on each of the resolutions in items 2 and 4 will be available later and before the end of the meeting. Presentations by the Chair and CEO. Finally, please ask any questions about the company's activities after the presentations by the Chairman and CEO, as these may cover many of the issues raised. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning again. On behalf of the AWI Board and Management, I welcome you to our 2019 AGM and thank each and every one of you for coming along today. The Australian wool growers, our shareholders, proxy holders, visitors, and of course those tuned into our webcast. This is an important meeting for AWI and its shareholders, who will be asked to vote on the election of directors and a series of changes that flow from the Ernst & Young review of performance commissioned by the federal government last year. We are delighted that so many of you have travelled long distances to be here today or have voted by proxy to have your say in the future of your company. I will make a few comments before handing over to Stuart, who will go into more detail about the company's activities, achievements and plans for the coming 12 months. Every AWI annual general meeting is important. It's an opportunity for you, our shareholders, to hear from us and for us to hear from you. But this AGM has added significance. Not only does it come against the backdrop of the terrible drought that has affected so many farming families and farming enterprises, which Stuart will discuss in more detail during his address, but there are important decisions to be made by shareholders that affect the future of your company. Item 2 on the agenda today relates to the changes to the Constitution that are required for AWI to implement the recommendations from the review of performance. Since the review was delivered last year, we've been working hard to implement its recommendations. At any time, you are able and have been able to visit our review of performance online portal to check our progress. I'm very pleased to report that 48 of the 82 recommendations have been implemented in full, and overall implementation rate is sitting at 88%. If shareholders vote in support of the changes to the Constitution that we are putting forward to this meeting today, those figures will increase significantly and we will be on track for full completion of these recommendations during 2020. As we've said previously, we've accepted in full 77 of the 82 recommendations, and we recognise that they will help us build a better AWI, better able to serve our wool growers. Of the remaining 5, which have involved proposed changes to AWI's democratic election model, we've consulted widely with the industry to reach a consensus position that best met the interests and expectations of our wool growers. Of all the major wool grower bodies, all of them were able to have their say, and with the endorsement of the Industry Consultative Committee, we took that consensus to government along with members of that ICC. We reached consensus on 4 items, including the retention of the 100 shareholder rule for board nominees and a new structure to ensure the independence of the Board Nomination Committee. This new structure for the Board Nomination Committee was successfully implemented for this round of director elections. The final item related to the tenure of directors remains the subject of ongoing discussions with industry, and we are confident that we will reach a consensus, and we expect to be able to take this item to shareholders at our AGM in 2020. One of the key principles that came through in the review of performance was the need for AWI to improve consultation with industry, and we have sought to do just that, not just in relation to the review itself. In July, we announced a new, enhanced industry consultation model to give wool growers more insight into AWI's operations and a greater say in the future of the Australian merino wool industry. Under the new model, 2 consultation forums replace the Industry Consultative Committee. There is a core AWI wool grower industry consultation panel, which will meet 3 times a year, and a broader AWI wool grower consultation group, which will meet annually. Importantly, the WICP, the Industry Consultation Panel, has an independent chairman. We place enormous value on the two-way consultation that these forums foster, as well as the transparency and the accountability that they facilitate. It's critical that we hear from industry, from those on the front line, so that we can respond to issues and, where necessary, adjust our priorities. It's equally critical for wool growers to gain a better insight into AWI's operations and to understand what AWI is doing to help them and the industry, and to have confidence that the levies are being invested effectively and efficiently. The first wool grower industry consultation panel was held on September the 2nd, and the first wool grower consultation group was held actually at this hotel last Friday. At that meeting last Friday, 28 of the most important wool industry groups were represented. And from that gathering, we get a genuine sense of the most pressing issues facing industry. And despite what you might read and hear in some noisy circles, let me tell you the most pressing issue is definitely not agri-politics. It will not surprise you to learn that the WCG discussion was dominated by drought, particularly preserving and rebuilding flocks when better times arrive, and the issues of predation, animal welfare, competitive land use, and competitor fibre use. These are the issues that are occupying the minds of people working in the wool industry and driving it forward. They are at the front and centre for AWI. They inform our priorities and ensure that we're all working together to provide the Australian wool industry with the support it demands and deserves at such a challenging time. With valuable input from wool growers and shareholders, AWI can ensure funding continues to flow to the most valuable and timely R&D projects and that really do help farmers on the ground, as well as into marketing campaigns that shore up the international demand for our fibre. As the drought has gone from bad to worse and prices remain unusually volatile, buffeted of course by international forces beyond anyone's control, such as the US-China trade tensions, this industry needs to stand together. There will always be disagreements and differing priorities, and that's healthy, and AWI welcomes constructive criticism. But disunity can be distracting at its best and, of course, destructive at worst. I believe in a strong and sustainable AWI, as the industry body that is owned and represents wool growers can be a unifying force. We all want what's best for the wool industry, and we all know that there is a bright future for Australian wool growers when these current conditions pass, as they surely will. I offer my congratulations to all of the 6 board nominees who have won the support of at least 100 of their fellow AWI shareholders and have put themselves forward for election today. Thank you for the commitment that you have to the wool industry and your willingness to take on the fiduciary duties, responsibilities and commitment that come with being a director of this company. There are only a limited number of vacant positions on the board, and whilst I'm sure that you could all make an important contribution to AWI and the industry, we will have a democratic vote in line with our charter and model to determine that outcome. I'd like to conclude by offering my thanks to AWI's Deputy Chairman, Dr. Meredith Shield. Meredith will not be putting herself forward for re-election today and will retire at the end of this meeting. Meredith has made an enormous contribution to AWI, particularly in the areas of science and welfare, but also in governance. Since joining the board in 2008, She's been unrelenting for her support of wool growers of Australia. She's been of great support to me in my role as chairman, and on behalf of the board, I wish her well in all of her future endeavours. I'll now hand the forum over to Stuart to provide more detail about current market conditions and, of course, AWI's activities. Thank you.
Well, welcome everyone. I've just got a slide issue here. Are you? Okay, that's it. Thank you everyone, and welcome to the 2019 AGM. My talk this morning is going to be a little briefer than normal. We're going to cover off some market conditions and where we think the demand and supply is going to be, some financials and how that impacts our financial position and expenditure, and then I'm going to move into some operations, then followed by some highlights of some of the macro programs, and then pass over to Laura Armstrong from a marketing point of view, and then Jane Littlejohn from an on-farm research point of view. First of all, wool prices, and if we look at the last 10 years anyway, you can see that the market has certainly had some great gains. That all was going very well until about, Christmas this year, I suppose, and it came off. There's been some radical movements happened in the last 12 months. There's some things that look a little unnatural to me. What is pleasing, I suppose, at the moment is it's settled between $15 and $16, and it seems to be bouncing in that space. What we know is the supply of wool. We know that that's been flat for largely the last 10 years at averaging about 338 million kilograms up until 12 months ago, and you can see those drop-offs. We did anticipate some rain over winter, which hasn't come our way, especially in New South Wales, and has meant that we've had to readjust our budgets again. Now this slide's a little busy, so bear with me here. What I asked for here was our biggest trade partners in terms of consumption. I wanted to demonstrate what demand might look like. We know about supply, and I wanted to look at demand over those big economies. You can see there that GDP, the total of GDP for those countries represents $52 trillion. That's actually 62% of the global GDP for those economies. In terms of the GDP growth, you can see it's diminishing, and you can also see the official interest rates as the governments try to stimulate growth. They're dropping the interest rates across all those economies with very little productivity. Nothing seems to be moving. The other figure that I will show you here is the Purchasing Managers Index. This is a measure of confidence used in macroeconomic terms. The level there that's the break even, I suppose, is 50, and you can see there it's just dropped below 50. Interestingly, there are two economies, the USA and China, that are just sitting above 50 and are determined to see one another go below 50, I think. What that has meant is our original budget that we resolved in May this year to draw down $21.5 million, we've had to readjust. On Wednesday this week, the Production Forecasting Committee met and resolved that a figure of 272 million kilograms was the figure for this year, which is a downgrading on 285, which we were working on before. We also budgeted back then at $18 a kilogram, and of course that's the market is well below that, and we've readjusted that to 15. What I did yesterday was go to the board and ask for another $7.5 million, which they've agreed to put into the budget as a drawdown figure that we can add. The first column here I circle is the original budget figure. What we've got to focus on is this column here, which is the new budget figure for the year. Last year, if we look at last year, we had a modest surplus of $1.8 million. That was on an expenditure of $100 million. That's pretty good. To come in with about 1.5% on budget is a very good year. We will draw down $29 million this year. The blue figures there, the blue bar, I want you to look at is from last year, 18-19, at $68.1 million, will now be $38 million. That is levy, and that's affected by the levy amount, the volume and the value of wool. And naturally, all those have contracted significantly, which has impacted that major revenue stream. In terms of reserves, you can see there again our estimated drawdown and our actual drawdown for this year. We finished last year with $124 million in cash. That excludes intangible equity, which is the value of the wool mark. And we aim to finish this year with $95 million in the bank. You can see there the orderly contraction of the company as we expect volume and value to, well, we don't know about volume, but certainly value we expect to stay about where it is. And we will minimise the drawdowns, $15 million next year and $8 million the year after. In terms of expenditure, the same applies as the company contracts. Our strategic intent doesn't change at all. Simply, we have compression amongst those portfolios, and every portfolio gets less. We spend on a 60, 25, 15 basis, which is 60% to marketing, 25% to on-farm research, and 15% to post-farm research. And all of those, whether they have more money going into them or less, will be adjusted accordingly. As Colette alluded to, the review of performance was handed down on the 9th of July last year. We are currently sitting at 88% overall implementation. That's not completion. At the moment, we have 48 out of 82 completed. Should the constitutional changes go through today, then that changes significantly. And tomorrow's figure should look like that, 96%. Now, also Colette alluded to the fact that we had agreed to, or the industry had agreed to, now 81 out of 82 recommendations. In terms of absolutely complete, 73 out of 82 will be absolutely complete after today's proceedings. Now, what that represents is 89% absolutely complete. So you can talk about overall implementation at 96 tomorrow or absolutely complete. But that will be 89%. One of the significant changes that we've made in the last 12 months upon a review recommendation was the change in measurement and evaluation. Measurement and evaluation, staff have tripled. The budget for measurement and evaluation has tripled in the last 12 months, and we are rolling that out. That is one of those recommendations that's not complete yet, but is nearly complete and impacts that overall implementation plan. Our strategic plan in every portfolio and every program has these measurement and evaluation criteria. These are what is represented in our mission statement: productivity and profitability to wool growers. And we will measure on that basis. We will measure at a project level, a program level, and a portfolio level, and we'll report under those terms to you. Just to give you an idea of what a standard portfolio might look like, and I've mocked this up, but that would be what would appear in an annual report in future. One of the things that we hear spoken about a lot is governance, and the word governance is thrown out there. And I wanted to tell you how we measure governance. This is how we measure governance. We have them subsectionalised into 6 areas: legislative, corporate, board, fraud and risk, finance and human resources. And just to give you a look at some of the policies and procedures we have, this is just corporate governance. These are all the policy and procedures we have under corporate governance. This is our human resources, policies and procedures. We have hundreds and hundreds of pages of policies and procedures, all available and viewable upon the website under corporate governance. Just put in the search for corporate governance and you'll see precisely what we're doing. But that is how we measure corporate governance. With regard to human resources, we had 195 people last year. We now have 175, and next year, when you're sitting here, we'll have 155. As the company contracts volume, value, levy, so must the human resources. As our project spends diminishes, so must our human resources. You would expect that. It means we've got to be smarter with our spend and use those human resources to the best of our capacity. Our gender equity remains well in favour of women. Tenure speaks to the culture of the company. We retain people without much problem at all. They stay for 6 years on average across 175 people. 6 years they stay at the company. They don't want to leave. The culture's good at the company. And that flows down from the board. One thing that will change in the next 12 months is turnover. Naturally, as the human resources contract, turnover must increase. We continue to foster young talent in the business. We have a graduate program. The first year in 2018 we brought in 3. Last year we brought in 2 graduates, and next year we bring in 1. We will continue to do that. We have the capacity to bring in 3 a year, but under the current circumstances we will be bringing 1 only into the business. Our publications is our best instrument of communication to wool growers. We either digitally or by post send out 50,000 beyond the bales 4 times a year. They go to 36,000 households, so we expect that they're read by a number of people. Our wool magazine continues to grow. The subscription to that is 15,000 at the moment. And that's very much focused at the other end of the supply chain, produced once a year. Some other publications, we have over 100 fly strike prevention papers on the website at the moment, and I wanted to show you that that collective of those. We have beyond the bale articles. There's 25 double-page beyond the bale articles, which are very informative, and you should get on and have a look. Newsletters. We've got 24 newsletters. With regard to drought recovery, currently we have 37 publications on drought recovery and drought sustainability on the website at the moment. We have conducted over 2,500 extension events around Australia over the last 2 years in drought recovery, and we will continue to do that through our extension networks. Next month we will embark on some advertising that will see us direct those affected wool growers to some of those drought recovery, drought sustainability programs that we have online. Marketing. Our numbers in marketing remain good, but again, because of the contraction in revenue, we're going to have to be smarter. We're going to have to be more strategic about what we do. And both with marketing and product development, I've asked those teams to focus on technical textiles, to, of course, support tailored textiles, but let's not grow that area. We see a gap that we can gain demand in technical textiles, and both those teams, marketing and product development, are working on that. We want to work with high-profile brands. That's going to be very important to us in the next year. We want to work with partners in the outdoor, active, athleisure sectors of the market. And you can see there that with the reduction in projects, we still look to have our media value up in order of what it was last year. Websites, we went live last Friday with our new website. I'd encourage you to go on and have a look at that, the new wool.com website. We had a couple of aims there. The first one was to declutter the website, which we've achieved. And the second one was to bolster it with market intelligence. We've found that that is particularly interesting to wool growers, and the new website does that. The third thing we wanted to do is improve the mobility access to that. So through our mobility devices, you should have no trouble scrolling that website and finding what you need to find. Our social media website and database numbers continue to grow. We've brought, we've grown the ecosystem, or people coming into our digital ecosystem by 240% in the last 12 months. Over the last 3 years, we've grown database entries by 400%, which are, promising numbers. And that information, especially the database information, not only to have the listing, but to have information about that person is very important to us in communicating with wool growers and our customers. Our marketing, some of our highlight marketing strategies, we embarked on this a few years ago. We branded the gondoliers in Venice. We put wool uniforms on them. We felt that that was a photograph opportunity that, with photograph opportunities today, they're all shared on social media. It's worked very well. In the last 12 months, we've got all the gondolier stations branded up with the wool mark, 45 of them around Venice. And in the next 12 months, we're going to add QR codes to those signs and make sure that not only consumers can come along with their phone and understand what the history of gondoliers, but they can understand our fibre as well. We think that's an important marketing opportunity. As I said before, we're going to focus on big projects that take less energy, and the Prada sponsorship of their boat Luna Rossa for the America's Cup in 2021 is one of our biggest programs. It's a costly program, but it yields on a whole lot of different levels. It was not only about product development, this project, it was about product testing. It's got merchandising opportunities in it. It's got retail opportunities through Prada directly. And the marketing channels that it delivers through is vast. So it's the perfect project for us. It has everything from marketing through to product development. Here's some imagery. I just want to show you a quick video of this boat. The other thing that's quite interesting that attracted us to this was the technology around this boat. We think that will garner a lot of attention as we move closer to the America's Cup. So Our interest in this is getting our product into areas it hasn't been before, or isn't recognised being, and this works rather nicely for us. Sheep production, I'm just going to go through a few highlights. We've of course got Laura and Jane coming on a little later on. Our priorities here haven't changed. Fly strike, wool harvesting, predation are all key pillars of this portfolio. The other one that's significant is agri-technology, and you will see a fair bit of that out there. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. With regard to fly strike, and I don't expect you to be able to see this at all, but a few years ago we decided to map all the elements of fly strike, and this is what it looks like. Now, if you want to have a look at this, I printed some A3 copies of this. If you want to have a look at this in more detail, just put your hand up and we can pass those around. But I did want to point out just 3 elements, which is DAG, breech wrinkle, and genetics. That's of the whole picture. So you can see the complexity of this program and why it's so challenging for us to solve it. I'd like to stand here today and say we've got a solution, but we don't. We don't have a solution to it. But there are some really interesting things that we're working on. The first one, and this image is a blinded, white-eyed fly that we've genetically modified using the genome. We mapped the blowfly genome, Lacilia caprina genome, in 2015. We remapped it again in 2018 and made some improvements. And then embarked between 15 and 18 on gene editing, CRISPR technology, which is moving genes around and affecting the fly. And we continue to do that work. The other pieces of work that this has informed is the blowfly vaccine and potentially a chemical solution to prevent this strike. Our work in robotic shearing continues. We reached out globally in the last 12 months with a call for proposals in this space. It's yielded a few. If there was more in the blowfly area and if there was more in robotic shearing, they would attract money. I have no doubt about that. The first one is a automated wool handling project. The second one radically redesigns the shearing handpiece. And the third one re-looks at some old technology in chemical defleecing. So there are 3 key projects that we'll be working on in the next 12 months. One of the other things that we're looking at the moment is trying to understand the energy and the stresses, skeletal stresses and muscle stresses that it puts on the body in shearing a sheep. And we are working with a university at the moment trying to understand precisely what's happening there and potentially identifying some efficiencies that can be created to help with those stresses. As I mentioned, agri-technology and our work, DigiBale, you will see out there DigiBale is a wholly owned subsidiary of AWI that we started about 8 years ago. The work in ear tag technology, we think that sensory technology on and in the animal and the algorithms of movement of the animal are going to assist you greatly in the future. And that signal off the animal is going to be very important in getting that signal off. As technology or data speeds improve and we move from 4G to 5G and 5G to 6G in the future, these technologies will be particularly valuable. This is a low-cost, low-speed ear tag that is very accessible to wool growers and will be on the market soon. With regard to product innovation, education extension, some key numbers there. The numbers are good. I suppose the great highlight there is the amount of students that have been educated at 47,000 students we've educated in the last 12 months. Our Wool Lab project, which is a long-standing project, continues to yield swatches that have gone out, 27,000 swatches. This is a demonstration of the best innovations and the best style guide that we can garner for fabrics anywhere in the world at any one time, and we profile that in all our major events around the world. The Woolmark Learning Centre is also out the door there. I'd encourage you to have a look at that. This has gone beta live in the last couple of months. We've had 500 people already complete their Woolmark Learning Centre course. We've got another 500 that are halfway through it at the moment, and we expect to go live with that very soon. The Woolmark Performance Challenge was a challenge that we set up in contrast to the International Woolmark Prize, which is very much focused around fashion. This is very much focused around product innovation. We wanted to extract out of the universities and the institutions and the companies around the world the best innovations we could in our fibre. Woolmark Performance Challenge 1 had 15 institutions involved and 500 people that applied for that award. This year, I'm happy to report, Woolmark Performance Challenge 2, we've got 118 institutions and over 1,000 people that have applied for that. These are the finalists that move forward and with their innovations, and the partners for this program last year were Adidas, and next year are Helly Hansen, I believe. Product innovation continues, again, based around sports, active, outdoor and surf. This year we launched a product, the windproof, waterproof fabric with Kelly Slater's brand Outer Known in California, and APL, a major shoe company in California again, we did a wool runner with them. Our distribution, or the growth in this performance fabric that was developed as part of a residual project, I suppose. The Optum machine was largely redundant after plenty of fine wool was produced. It was designed to create fine wool, and genetics fixed that up. So those machines were redundant. We moved them off to China. We started some projects. We developed a windproof and waterproof fabric, and the extension of that particular fabric continues across some major brands in the world. As I said, the Prada America's Cup also has a great element of product development and product testing in it. And you know, as they train in these garments, we are getting data back from them as to how they're performing. So we monitor that on the way through. As our Woolmark, our certified Woolmark branded garments contract, we've had to rethink that model, and what we're planning to do is create a Woolmark supply chain integrity model. This starts, of course, with WoolQ. This starts, of course, before WoolQ. It starts with the branding of bales on farm. We know that Gen Ys, Gen Zs and Gen Alphas that are coming on after those are particularly interested in understanding not only where it's come from, how it was treated in the supply chain, where it's going to after that. And we've got to develop something that appeals to them. The idea of having a paper-based system I could not be less interested in. We must do this digitally. The only way to do that is to start with getting clean data off the farm, and WoolQ is perfectly positioned to do that. Get clean data off the farm. We have some blockchain projects connecting the supply chain. Automated clearing houses have progressed very quickly to clear money and funds up those supply chains. And with the blockchain and ACHs and WoolQ, we believe we can pull this off digitally. At the other end of the supply chain, near-field communication tags, and I think there's some being demonstrated in garments out the door there, offer us a really interesting way of getting a lot of information to the consumer. Swing tags were typically known as that communication tool, but with the advent of e-commerce, things won't be swinging on a garment anymore. You look at them online, they come in a box. So swing tags aren't necessary, but that information, to communicate the information about that garment and get that across, the mobile phone offers us a real opportunity to do that. And we're starting to see great uptake of these near-field communication tags. Every phone in every pocket of this room, I think, will be near-field communication abled. So you can do that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to now hand this over to Laura Armstrong, who's going to elaborate on her marketing portfolio. After that, we'll go to Jane, and then after that, we'll take some questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stu. I'm Laura Armstrong. I'm the GM of Marketing Communications. I'm going to take you through an overview of the marketing strategy and a snapshot of some of the achievements that we've made in the past 12 months. Last year, we landed 114 strategic marketing projects. Our investment strategy is split across 3 key outcomes. Number 1, building fibre advocacy and reputation through marketing campaigns, which are primarily managed globally. Secondly, we have our defence strategy, defending our core categories such as knitwear and tailoring through men's and women's wear projects. And finally, driving growth for the industry through partnerships with sports and performance brands. All of our activity is connected back to commerce. There's no such thing as generic marketing. So when we put out a marketing project or a campaign, we link it back to a purchase through social or partner integration. And we continue to focus on the millennial audience. We focus on them because they're about to inherit more money than any other generation before, and we refer to them as our lost audience. They grew up with fast fashion. They grew up on polyester. They're not familiar with wool or merino wool or its benefits or why they should invest in it. So they need a re-education. They need an education, and their parents need a re-education because their parents actually grew up with that itchy, scratchy fibre. So we have a lot of work to do. Some of the brands that we worked with in the past 12 years are just up on the screen here. We have some new brands in our network, including Prada and the North Face in Korea. And so we've recurred some projects with our more successful partnerships, such as Amazon and Adidas. In terms of the marketing ecosystem, we currently have, as I said, 114 brand collaborations this year. They include some of the most prolific e-commerce partners. In China, we work with Tmall. In the US, we work with Amazon to push sports and performance product. And we work with global e-commerce platform Farfetch to push luxury product around the world. We also have an enhanced bricks and mortar strategy, which has been re-energized with digital integration through beacons, digital swing tickets, and QR codes for the Asian market. We promote our brand message through campaigns. Those campaigns focus on the actual benefits of the fibre, whether that's thermal regulation or moisture wicking, promoting the meaning of the mark and building advocacy for the fibre and the Woolmark brand itself. We obviously rely a lot on earned media because we don't spend a lot on paid media. We do that across PR and social and events. And we currently own 5 websites: wool.com, which was recently relaunched last week to service the wool industry, woolmark.com, which services the trade and consumers in 5 separate languages, International Woolmark Prize for the young designers, Wool for School for education, and Woolmark Performance Challenge for textile innovation. We also promote ourselves through influencers and ambassadors. They validate our message, and we currently have over 100 influencers and ambassadors across the sports and eco industries promoting sports and eco benefits to their own audiences. And we own 8 social media platforms to validate our message, and that there works most effectively for the younger market. And we own 2 social media platforms specifically for the China market. In terms of our performance across these strategies, our websites collectively garner about 400,000 users each year. That's an 8% decline on last year, and that is a strategy that we actively pursued because we want to keep our audiences on our social platforms because that's where the younger generation are actually consuming the media. Also, we're not as focused as driving audiences to our platforms because we don't sell anything. We're more concerned with driving them to our partners' websites where they can actually purchase. In terms of our social media performance, we have generated some significant increases there. Our reach is on average about 20 million audience members. That's a 62% increase on last year. Our impressions are up 77% on last year. We've actually grown our social audience by 15% from last year, sitting around 935,000 audience members. And our engagement rate is up 11%, validating that our actual content is sticking better with these guys. Of course, talking to the trade and the industry is vitally important. As Stu mentioned, we have our wool magazine. That's now an annual magazine. It used to be biannual, but we've obviously had to scale back there with costs. And we talk regularly to the supply chain through our database of 25,000 on email. As I mentioned, media coverage is fundamental to our marketing strategy because we don't do a lot of paid media. Last year, we generated $62.3 million worth of editorial value through press coverage. That's a 10% uplift on last year. And I just wanted to point out that $2.2 million worth of that coverage was actually secured on social platforms, thus demonstrating this trend away from traditional platforms to the social space. Each year, we roll out a market research project with Nielsen. We interview around 8,000 consumers to get a real pulse of how wool is sitting in the industry, what would cause a consumer to buy us or to not buy us. And whilst there is a positive incremental decline in our barriers every year, itchy, scratchy, easy care and price continue to be our biggest challenges. In response to these challenges, we build marketing programs and fibre advocacy campaigns, taking on those misconceptions head on. So this year, we will roll out a campaign promoting the softness of wool, specifically for sportswear. We will promote the easy care nature of wool, targeting new adults and millennials who are maybe moving into new houses and don't actually know how to wash their own clothes yet. And the eco-credentials of wool, we will be targeting that to young parents, to children, and to their grandparents. And then in response to pricing resistance, one of our strategies is the Woolmark certification program, which guarantees quality, and quality can justify higher priced products. And I'm really pleased to report that in our recent survey, we have an unwavering 85% of consumers recognise that that Woolmark symbol means quality. We have a 3% uplift in consumers stating that they will pay more for a product that carries the Woolmark symbol. And we have a 7% uplift in consumers that are saying they're actively looking for the Woolmark when they go into the shop. Our defence strategy, which focuses on our fashion projects, we launched 79 collaborations last year, and that's covers everything from product innovation, media, content, retail training and visual merchandising, and commerce promotion. We continue to target the top end of the fashion triangle. The reason we do this is because they are influential and they can help us reach a wide level of contemporary brands. And they also have the elasticity in their pricing strategy to cope with higher wool prices. And we were pleased to see that in 2018, our Nielsen study proved that we saw a 4% increase in consumers that were willing to pay more for merino wool than any other fibre. And just to have a little bit more of a granular look at how a fashion project works, I pulled out farfetch.com. We've been working with this brand. It's an e-commerce, one of the biggest luxury e-commerce shopping sites in the world. We've worked with them for about 3 years. And what we do with them is we ensure that merino wool product and product benefit messaging is up front and centre on the homepage when their shoppers come to spend money throughout the autumn-winter season in the Northern Hemisphere. And after this 3-year project with them, we've actually seen some really significant gains. One of which is we compare 2 different products that are very similar, 2 sweaters. One of them has merino wool in the product description and one does not. The one with merino wool in the description can convert to a sale 145% faster than the one that is not called merino wool. Obviously, we take that intel to our brand partners and that there's a real carrot for them to continue to grow their merino wool categories. We've also seen wool growth surpass cashmere on this platform in the past 12 months, and we've seen searches for wool product grow by 165%. That's obviously an incredible result for that particular project. And then when you take a more macro level at how we're performing, Nielsen allowed us to interview women's wear and menswear shoppers. We went into their wardrobe to see how their wardrobes were changing. And in 2012, they had 8% wool in their wardrobes, and we saw this grow now to 12% in 2018, reinforcing that we're actually making a difference. And finally, and arguably the most important part of our strategy, is our sports and performance strategy for driving growth. Currently, polyesters and cotton dominate this market, so the idea of wool sportswear is actually quite new, so we have a lot of awareness building to do here. Last year, we launched 43 sportswear collaborations promoting merino wool performance benefits. We earned over 400 media clips positively explaining and talking about the appropriateness of merino wool for sport. And we increased the conversation about merino wool on social media and through digital media by nearly 300%. Some of the highlights she's already touched on with our partnership with Prada. We also partnered once again with Adidas and the Boston Marathon to target marathon runners all over North America to show them why they should be working out in wool. And we actually created a co-branded working out running t-shirt with Adidas, particularly for that project. And finally, I just wanted to conclude and reinforce how critical these marketing projects and these partnerships are to ensure Australian merino wool remains visible, competitive, and relevant to the future consumer. The new consumer coming up the ranks is very savvy. They have hugely high expectations of their brands, and they're very picky about how they spend their money. So we need to work doubly hard to ensure that we convince them that what we have is brilliant. Wool has the potential to mean something to everybody, so we really have to focus and double down on this. I'd like to thank all of our partners who supported our vision and promoted wool to the world, and I'd like to congratulate the global marketing team for a commendable result this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, CEO, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'll give you just a snapshot of our on-farm R&D and the successes last year, but I'll start with our fibre research program for health and wellbeing from wearing wool and the eco-credentials of wool. And these are good examples of our research to market pipeline that feeds into Laura's strategies. Global healthcare professionals were engaged with the scientific evidence of the benefits of wearing superfine merino wool base layers. Over 2 months, an online information and social media campaign to those professionals delivered some impressive statistics, which really included over 4 minutes average time spent per page and over 1,000 visits to the Woolmark product carousel where people could buy stuff, clothing, and those figures are rising. On wool's eco-credentials, evidence and promotion continued to build. AWI leads a 6 RDC collaboration to engage with the European Union on their environmental footprint labelling of Australian products. AWI made 80 retail brands aware of published research critiquing the artificial handicap to wool's environmental ranking against synthetic fibres. And wool is biodegradable, but to beat synthetics at that microplastics game, AWI funded evidence of wool biodegrading at 90 days in marine environments. Now to on-farm. The Sheep Health and Welfare Program delivered groundbreaking R&D investments in fly strike and wool biosecurity. Stu's mentioned the world first fly strike vaccine project, but we're also mapping the blowfly genetic diversity across Australia, and those products commenced in earnest last year. Worryingly, the number of blowflies resistant to common chemicals is increasing. The majority of samples testing positive for resistance. So investments continue to focus on an integrated fly strike or parasite management approach and across all forms of fly strike. Progressing wool post-farm biosecurity is international interest in an AWI-funded mathematical model for estimating heat by time effects on wool within bales. This is important to sufficiently deactivate diseases such as FMD. The genetics program has had broad successes in benchmarking and artificial breeding. Data collection continues in the Merino Lifetime Productivity Project, the MLP project you would hear about. And that's over the life of 5,500 merino ewes. All data is destined for research or for genetic benchmarking, and it includes raw data on progeny and Australian sheep breeding values, or ASBVs, on size. Other benchmarking successes are the New South Wales DPI Merino weather trial analysis, which showed the productivity of 73 bloodlines over the last 12 years, and also Merino sire evaluation. They published 5 years of results and a list of the all-time top 50 sires. To artificial breeding, the sexed fresh semen technique is being commercialised by a US company. AWI's artificial breeding workshop facilitated a new importer of PMSG to Australia, which was of a previous concern to stud breeders. And there was a major progress in cervical AI, which led to international R&D projects. Vertebrate pests. The vertebrate pest program centres on AWI's collaboration with communities. AWI funded 9 wild dog coordinators and 4 of them were co-funded positions. 615 people attended training days. The Community Wild Dog Control Initiative, which is a grant program, supported 16 pest groups last year, making a total of 194 groups funded in the last 9 years. Last year, nearly 39,000 sheep were saved based on surveys, and over 6 years, 147,000 sheep have been saved. Last year, 92% of those surveyed said their wellbeing had improved by participation in this initiative, and 45% saw more native animals on their properties. And I'm not just talking kangaroos, I'm talking lovely, cute, furry things. AWI loaned 2 extension fencing construction units, one to Queensland, one to WA for their exclusion fencing programs. Feral Scan, a digital recording tool, website and app, has 365 registered group users. So that's the community recording data on feral pests. And Trap Alert and Wild Dog Alert, again 2 digital tools, are being commercialised. The star of the reproduction program is lifetime ewe management training. 310 wool grower enrolments last year were subsidised, and despite drought, over 11 years of data, trainees reported a 9% increase in stocking rate, a 7% increase in marking rate, and a 1% decrease in ewe mortality rate. The stars of the feed-based program are collaborations. Research continues into filling the feed gap with MLA, GRDC or Dairy Australia by building knowledge on legumes, establishing shrub systems and defining the nutrient value of crop stubbles. Development continues for feed-based training resources in consultation with MLA, GRDC and Dairy Australia. And AWI again co-funded with the RDCs the Australian Pastures Gene Bank. AWI's digital innovations, which Stu touched on, are deployed in the field at the moment, and I do invite you to look at the display outside. The DigiBale system is a holistic, automated remote monitoring system. It's got add-on functions and low component costs. Our in-house researchers completed the solar-powered ear tags, the battery collars, the in-paddock readers, compatibility with other sensors, and the internet-capable gateway. New algorithms in research are predation and welfare alerts, grazing behaviours, feed intake, and mounting, lambing and oestrus. I congratulate our research partners who do all this work. They had a successful year, and I thank my team who managed this research program on behalf of wool growers. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Jane and Laura, for those excellent presentations, and terrific to get such good insights to the excellent work that is being done in this area of marketing and science and welfare on behalf of all of our growers. Thank you, Stuart, too, for your excellent overview. I now invite your questions and comments on the reports provided by Stuart and me. Shareholders may also raise questions or comments that you have about the first item of business in the notice of meeting, the financial report of the company, the director's report and the auditor's report for the year ended the 30th of June 2019. I remind you that if you are holding a white, blue or pink voting card or a blue admission card, you may ask a question or make a comment at this point when invited to do so. Please follow the procedure that has already been outlined. The AWI officer at the microphone will announce your name to the meeting, and I will invite you to clearly state your question or comment. And it's important that everyone hears your question and comment, so just bear that in mind. That would be very helpful. And we will also take questions, not only from the room but from the webcast at this time in the meeting as well. So Stuart and I are available, as indeed are the other members that I have already introduced, other consultants to the company and executives in the company available to answer your questions now. So I open up the floor.
Andrew Woods.
Thanks very much, Jeff. So Andrew Wood, New South Wales Farmers, well done AWI. I'm sure if all wool growers knew what exactly it did, that they'd have a lot more confidence to continue to invest and continue feeding their animals at home. The question I've got is in relation to the education. Stuart, you mentioned that 47,000 students were educated. I assume that's just Australian students. I just wonder if it's going to go worldwide, and if we can continue to educate those people based on what Laura said about re-educating the youth as to the quality and the value of wool, and particularly the carbon footprint. A discussion we had last week at Friday's meeting about that sort of the paddock, well, the sort of the gate, the whole concept of sort of how do you measure the carbon footprint and all that sort of stuff. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wood, for your comments. We agree with you. You know, we really make every effort possible to get all of the good news out about the good work that has been done on behalf of wool growers. Stuart outlined a lot of the mechanisms that are available, both in the written form but particularly online, and the investment that's been made in rebuilding the website and giving mobile access to what is on the website. There is just so much information available, and we really do encourage everyone to have a look at those resources because it's a treasure trove, it really is. So I thank you very much for your comments. In relation to the education piece and the carbon piece, I'll hand to Stuart.
Yeah, look, we found, we tried to do this with people, you know, for the last 10 years, I suppose, and that's what prompted us to build the digital platform. The appetite for education is insatiable. We could throw as much money at this and humans at this as, year on year and grow it. We built this platform to alleviate that pressure and do it in an efficient way. And certainly your point about carbon and microfibres and those sorts of things is all covered off in those modules online. So I'd encourage everyone to get on there when they can.
Yes, Chair, we have a question here from Anita Taylor.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. My question is directed at Stuart. Stuart, it's great to see the work that you're doing in traceability, and obviously that's driven by the consumer. Having just sat through MLA's Beef Week and looking at the work that they're doing on their integrity systems and the data that needs to be collected on farm, are we working in conjunction with them so that as growers and producers we only have to collect our data once and then it can be transmitted up in on a common platform so that wool, fibre, meat can all contain the same information?
Thank you, Ms Taylor.
Not at the moment. With that specific thing, we work with, we have collaborations with roughly 14 other RDCs in various areas, and MLA is a big shared project partner with us. But on that specific thing, no. We're in the very early stages of ours. We've built our WoolQ platform, but it's open access, so anyone can, any wool grower can add whatever data they want to that. Expanding it from a mutton point of view, I suppose, is an interesting concept and something we should consider for sure. And I think it'd be an easy adjunct to that platform, to be honest.
I think we have a question online.
Yes, Chairman. A question here from Neil Harris, Costerfield in Victoria. Given the huge GDP of the United States of America, an economy that is travelling quite well at the moment, does AWI identify opportunities for further access and seeking new marketing options for what is still the largest economy in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. The USA is a bit of a hole for us, a bit of a pothole for us in terms of consumption. Just with roughly equal population to the UK and Europe, Greater Europe, with the same affluence as Europe and the UK, and with the same climate as the UK, they should consume, logically, the same as someone from the UK and Europe. They don't. They consume about a third of what they consume in UK and Europe. So 300 grams in the States and about a kilo per head in UK and Europe. So there's something there that we haven't been able to exactly figure out. We've done a lot of market research in the last couple of years. Care. The ability to care for a garment was a key thing that came up, and Laura has this week launched a care campaign in the USA, focused at the USA precisely. We think sports, active, outdoor, athleisure and dressing down is an opportunity for us, and certainly our programs in that area appeal to that particular market. You're right, it is a market that's showing, it's one of the few that's showing a bit of promise at the moment, so we're quite keen to participate in that field. The other piece of research that we move on to after care, our program next year, is on handle, on softness. We did our data research and marketing research on what is required for that market, like we do for all markets, and handle was one of the things that came up there. So our marketing strategy next year for there is about softness and handle. I think Neil did an event for us last week, didn't he? Oh, well, thank you.
Mr. John Collier.
My question's for Stuart. Stuart, I understand that AWI commissioned a report on WoolQ, and I have several small questions that are quite easy to answer around it. One is the report going to be made available to industry? And two, can I ask why the wool brokers were not consulted in that? As being President of National Council, I know that there's nothing came across our board at all as to how that could be beneficial to the industry.
Mr Colley, thank you for your question. That report was a report for the board and for the board's consideration. That is something that the board is currently considering, and we were looking at specific aspects in that report, and the board will determine, next steps as a result of that. So, thank you.
Can I just add, the three things we wanted to look at was ownership, operations and liquidity of that particular platform, and get some fresh eyes on it. They did that, they delivered it. That the brokers weren't contacted is news to me. That was put in the hands of a consulting firm, and they went about choosing who they interview.
Next question.
Stephen Bignell.
No, Callum. Sorry, Callum. Thanks, Jeff. Just wondering what AWI's plan is with getting more shearers. So obviously once we're out of these conditions we're in, we're hoping to see the increase of more merinos. What are we going to do, or AWI's strategy, bring in more younger shearers to actually get the wool off these sheep?
Yeah, it's a big problem. We know that numbers are down at the moment, but we expect they will recover. We hope they will recover, and we'll be certainly working hard with wool growers to make sure that they've got those drought recovery tools. Shearing, for as long as I've been at the company, shearing's been an issue, or the access to labour. We do a number of programs in this area, training programs, and I've just asked the team to have a revisit of this. We've got of course, the robotic stuff happening and the automation things happening, but we've got to continue to train, and we're not taking the foot off the accelerator there. That's still attracting the same amount of money, and will continue to attract the same amount of money in the future. What we're looking for is new ideas to attract shearers to the market. There's some programs that and I think we have Rob Ingram here today, the seasonal workers program, working with those sorts of visa-friendly labour sources is a priority. So we're trying everything we can. We're open to ideas, and nothing's going to be sacrificed there in terms of funding.
Chairman Anthony Close. Yeah, g'day. I'm just picking up on Andrew's comment there about that if wool growers actually knew more what AWI did, they'd probably understand a lot of the decisions and that a lot more. Just as a next generation wool grower, is there any thoughts of AWI entering the biggest social media platform in Facebook, or having more of an online presence at a grower, like talking to the growers? Because at the moment you don't even have a Facebook platform. So yeah, just some comments around that, and yeah, that's it.
Thanks very much, Mr. Close. This is a topic that is a hot topic at the board. Is getting out the information that we have and making it more readily accessible to you. Rebuilding the website was obviously part of that, ensuring that it was mobile friendly and all the information was available on mobile was certainly one of those things. We are going to continue to build and develop to ensure that we are where our growers are, and Facebook has been a discussion that we have had at the board level to be able to sort of put ourselves forward in a way that would be easy to access. The other point that you make that we are, very highly engaged with is this generational change in growers, and making sure that we are speaking to and encouraging as many of the next generation as possible. And in fact, just yesterday at the board meeting, that topic was discussed twice. how do we do that? We had the wool grower consultation group last week. Actually, just here, I mentioned that in my address to you. And we did have some fresh faces, let me say, at that meeting, and it was fantastic. It was really good. So we do want to do that and engage. So your point is well made and very well understood. And we'd be happy to talk to you about, after the meeting. We've got Laurie here. I'm sure we've got Damien here from our digital team, and we'd love to talk to you after the meeting about any ideas that you might have, because it is something that we really want to be great at, because there's a lot there for you.
Mr. Malcolm Cater.
Thank you, Jeff. Congratulations on the feeling in this room today is so much different to last year, and I congratulate you as Chair Lady on the presentation you've done, and whoever gets on the board, I congratulate them too. My problem is, and I'm starting to sound like my father who's well dead, but our handlers at Merino shows, and you all come to shows and present yourselves very nicely, is becoming very daggy. And as an old rugby bloke, if you can't play football, you've got to dress like you can. And I don't know, you've got to go to the top, work down, and I think somewhere at a board meeting or one of your committees, we may look at the way we are presenting ourselves to hold a sheep. If you go into the cattle ring, none of our handlers, from what I've seen, not all of them, most of our handlers at the moment would not get a lead rope in a bull ring. And I think there's something that needs to be looked at, because you've been showing us all these wonderful things we're doing with wool. If you can't be it, dress like it or something. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cater, and I thank you for your kind remarks as well. It's appreciated, I assure you. The comments on the presentation of handlers, we have entered into, we have sponsored, and I do see around some shows some dress bibs. Actually, the Dubbo Sheep Show comes to mind. Dress bibs that we've provided, it feels like some time ago, and they look like they could do with a good wash. Yes, and I'm always so impressed at the Adelaide Sheep Show at how well presented all of the handlers are there. They're very smart. So look, it's a great branding opportunity for the company, and it's a great way for us to engage more with the industry. We'll take your comments on board. Thank you.
Mr. Jim Gordon.
Thank you. I can't commend well enough on the capabilities of AWI. My problem is I disagree with most of what you're doing, and I would like to get control back of my levies. I've got absolutely no control of what's going on. Is there any way this can happen?
Well, I'm pleased that you're happy with the capabilities that we have, Mr. Gordon. In relation to the levies, we are a company and we're owned by the shareholders of the Wool Growers of Australia that choose to be shareholders. Those shareholders get a say in the company. All levy payers, of course, get a say in the wool poll, and we encourage as many levy payers as possible to become shareholders. Shareholders, of course, get a say in a lot more with the company. For example, they're entitled to vote today on resolutions. They're entitled to vote today for their directors at that company, and that is the way to participate by voting, and also being part of the consultation forums that we have. We have, as I outlined, a number of consultation forums. We have the Wool Grower Industry Consultation Panel. We have the Wool Grower Consultation Group. And we are in our game, actually, in consultation and engagement has lifted a lot in the last 12 months. Now, so many of the board, and I know so many of the executive in the company, make their way to as many industry events as possible in order to engage with our levy payers and shareholders, and we encourage them to do that. Engaging with the company, participating in forums, speaking to your representatives on those groups, whether it's the industry consultation panel or the grower group, you know, we welcome all of that. So, and I think that is the way for you to have a say, and it's the way to make your feelings known, of course, as well as telling me here today. Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Okay. Thank you very much. We might...
just one more question?
Oh, yes, yes, of course.
Yep. Mr. Nigel Curran.
Thanks, Jeff. I think I'll address the question to Colette with a bit of help from Stu. Could we go back to Laura's presentation? There was one slide there she had with all the... it was a full page of all the high-end companies you got on board with your marketing direction. Can we get that one up as I'm talking? Is that possible?
Might be possible.
Because it'll just add weight to where I'm going with the question. What I picked up from Stu's presentation was we're very much directing our energy to the high end of the market because, yeah, that's it. Yeah, David Jones was there. We're directing our energy towards the high end of the market, to the highest valued end that we can get to, which is very much what's on this screen. And what comes with targeting the high end of that market is you're actually marketing to some of the most socially aware, savvy, connected people that you could possibly want to market to. And very much with the use of social media and internet and everything that's going on in the world. What did send a chill down my spine was they are that smart, that bunch that you're advertising to, the millennials. I struggle to see how you can supply enough wool into that market that's not mulesed. And I'm thinking to myself, two things will happen. You'll either lose that market because you won't be able to supply it with... I just have a feeling into the future the tipping point's coming very, very quickly with what's acceptable in this social media-driven world that we live in, that we have no control over. I look at all those companies there and I know there's none of them would ever want to be associated with mulesing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kieran. Stuart.
I take your point. Every kilogram of wool sells every year. Every kilogram's converted to garments every year. Every garment sells every year. And wool prices have gone considerably up in the last 9 years. So we have no doubt there's enough demand there. All our wool's getting consumed. It's getting consumed at a high price. Probably not as high as it was last year, but not bad. And we expect that to continue. We market at the very pinnacle of the fashion triangle because fashion filters down and they're high-value garments. We could market to Kmart, Target, Walmart, Costco, and as soon as the price went up, they'd get out of it into a polyester, and then when it went down, they'd get back into it, and that sends peaks and troughs down the supply chain into your pocket. So we've never played there. We never will play there. We'll pitch it always at the pinnacle of the fashion triangle. We'll pitch it with brands that not only have consumption benefit, but have kudos benefit as well, that attract media attention to our fibre, because you again get a filtering down effect with that. And they're high priced. I want to work with partners that have the elasticity in their pricing to consume wool at $15 a kilogram or $30 a kilogram. I don't want to work with partners that are just in the space of 15 to 16. So I understand your point of view there, or your statement there. We work to sell all wool, no section of wool. All wool's good wool, whether they be locks, crutchings, dags, whatever. It's all good. It all sells, and it all has a value.
Chair, we have a question from Robert England.
Yes.
Thank you. My question, if I can find it, has is two-pronged. There have been requests made that I'm aware of on at least 4 occasions to AWI in relation to funding of industry organisations. In the last annual report or the previous one, the report says that the AWI funded 52 industry organisations in Australia. We were requested by AWI to check in the annual report that if that information was in the annual report, and that's been checked, and that information is not there. So we go back now and ask the question publicly that we want to see the forensic detail of the funding provided to those 52 organisations. Also been requested is the monitoring and evaluation framework. And the monitoring and evaluation framework, the copy of that document, is essential to evaluating the programs, accountability and transparency. And we would like to be able to review that framework to ensure that it is capable of achieving that. Thank you.
Who's we?
Australian Wool Growers Association.
Okay. Australian Wool Growers Association. The M&E framework, I don't have an issue with you seeing the structure of that we commissioned at a high cost upon recommendation from the review of performance, a consultant to come in and develop a M&E framework for us. We've tripled the dollars going into it. We've tripled the human resources going into it. And any time you want, Rob, you can come into the office and sit with Tracy and her team, and they can take you through that chapter and verse. It's on the website. And it's on the website. So let us know what you want there. With regard to that other item, that was, if my memory serves me, an issue that came up as part of the WICP, where we gave you a list of, I don't know where you're getting the 52 from, but I think there was about 12, if my memory serves me, that were mentioned there that had that were the beneficiaries of some funding, and you wanted to go to you wanted to know over $1,000 what the $1,000 went to. Well, I don't know that detail, and you'd have to go down to a fair level of scrutiny to get that detail, and then it might be interesting, but probably not that useful to you, to be honest. Look, we can talk about that. You can make another request through the WICP. I presume they didn't hit the annual report because the materiality level of them was so low that, that they didn't make it. They didn't make the grade. We have a materiality cut-off there, which I think is $100,000 or something like that. Under that, they don't feature in the annual report.
Mr. Alistair McDougall.
Yes, thank you. Look, in relation to the comments about eco-savvy future, my understanding is there is significant work already being done for feeding strategies that give reduced methane outputs. My question is, are there any of the research programs cross-linked to that work that could be effectively feeding into the eco questions and eco data?
Thank you, Mr. McDougall.
We did a project some years ago on a drench, I think, to reduce methane, or an additive of some description to produce methane. As I'm aware of it, we don't have any. Sorry, Jane? Oh, there you go. At the moment, we don't have anything under funding at the moment in that specific area, but Jane informs me that we're talking to MLA about something along those lines.
Anita Taylor.
Chair, thank you for indulging me a second question. Just picking up on what was said about the consumer again and what they're looking for and the decision making that they go through when they buy wool, and the important mulesing debate noted. That's just one aspect of what the consumer is looking for. They're looking to make decisions on carbon use, on land care, employee treatment and many other quality assurance programs that most producers in Australia are actually adhering to, and we have a wonderful, wonderful story around that. Are we looking in our traceability platform at some common language around sustainability, land care, some of the ethical issues that are really important to consumers? Thank you.
Certainly, Ms Taylor.
Cradle to, the problem we've got here is that most retailers measure cradle to gate, and when I mean gate, the store door. If you measure cradle to gate, polyesters, the man-made petroleum and man-made cellulosics come up very good, and wool comes up, or the natural fibres, wool and cotton, linen come up very poorly. If you measure cradle to grave, which is the biodegradability factor, after the store door, completely reversed. So what we've got, our fibre advocacy program is very much focused around trying to tender that story, and we have advocates actively working in the Northern Hemisphere to tender that full story to them, the whole truth of wool's life cycle analysis, because it's very convenient for retailers to measure cradle to gate and then not worry about it after that, but it puts wool on a life cycle analysis in a poor situation. So we've got a big program, our fibre advocacy area, and working on demonstrating the biodegradability of wool and making sure that story is told is very important to us. And you.
Michelle Humphreys.
Just a comment for Ms Taylor. AWI has contributed to the new sheep sustainability framework, which will be addressing some of those issues.
Thanks very much, Dr Humphreys. Okay. It looks as if we're good and we're ready to move on to the formal business of this meeting. I'd like to thank all of those participants in the questions. A lot of that was very valuable and we appreciate it enormously. We're now moving to the consideration of the reports. And the first, the agenda item 1 is to receive and discuss the financial report of the company, the director's report and the auditor's report for the year ended the 30th of June 2019. It's not necessary to vote on item 1, and the reports were discussed in the CEO's report. So we will now proceed to the changes to the Constitution resolution, which is item 2 in the agenda. Agenda item 2 and the first resolution is set out in the notice of meeting. The changes to the Constitution resolution is a special resolution, which means that it must be passed by a minimum 75% majority of votes cast on the resolution. The board recommends this resolution be passed by shareholders. As chairman of the meeting, I have 38,735 open proxies directed to me on this resolution, and I intend to vote them for this resolution. If you are holding a white, yellow or pink voting card or a blue admission card, you may ask a question or make a comment in relation to the changes to the Constitution resolution at this time.
Chairman Paul Cocking.
Thank you. Heather Klett, how are you?
Very well, Mr Cocking, welcome.
Thank you. My questions is about the B&C.
Yes.
And about the appointment of, in the notes it says the initial chair was appointed by the Secretary of Department of Agriculture. I was wondering, after this year, can you explain who and how the chair will be appointed?
Well, the ROP, the Ernst & Young ROP recommendation made the recommendation in the first instance that it would be the department, which of course we complied with. And I think that their suggestion thereafter was that it would revert to the company. However, this will be a topic that we will discuss with the department going forward. We were very happy with the process. We had an independent chairperson of that BNC committee appointed by the department, and the process was extremely well run and we think performed very well. So it's a matter of ongoing discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so there are no more questions in relation to that. Thank you very much. If there are no further questions, we will now proceed to item number 3, which is the board size limit resolution. Agenda item 3 and the second resolution is set out in the notice of meeting. The proposed board size limit resolution is an ordinary resolution, which means that it can be passed by a majority of votes cast on this resolution. The status of voting on this resolution after the close of proxy voting is set out on the screen. As chairman of the meeting, I have 32,037 open proxies directed to me on this resolution, and I intend to vote them for this resolution. All those in favour of item 3, please raise your voting card. Thank you. All those against item 3, please raise your voting card. Thank you. I declare item 3 carried on a show of hands. As the resolution is passed, there will be 3 vacancies on the board, and the meeting will proceed to be conducted on this basis. Agenda item 4 is the election of directors. Resolution 4 is set out in the notice of meeting. There are 8 nominated candidates for the position of director. Each candidate is represented here today, and I will ask each of you to stand and identify yourselves when I say your name. Paul Cocking. George Faulkner. Noel Henderson. Janelle Hocking-Edwards. Philip Holmes. Michelle Humphreys. Wal Merriman. David Webster. Thank you. We will now proceed to the 3 candidate vote at item 4 on the agenda. Wal Merriman and David Webster are current directors who retire by rotation and offer themselves for re-election in accordance with Rule 13.3A of the Constitution. Director Meredith Shield also retired by rotation but has elected to retire from the board at the end of this meeting. The other 6 candidates have been nominated by at least 100 shareholders eligible to vote at the AGM in accordance with the Constitution. As chairman of the meeting, I have 19,949 open proxies directed to me on this item, and I intend to vote them in accordance with the statement made in the notice of meeting. If you are holding a white, yellow or pink voting card or a blue admission card, you may ask a question or make a comment regarding the election of directors at this point. As there are no questions, we will now proceed to the poll on agenda item 2 and 4. In order to vote on these resolutions, you need to use your yellow voting card. We have asked our auditors to attend with Link Market Services on the counting of the poll. They will work with Link in a scrutineer type role. I will now ask Ros Johnson, our returning officer from Link Market Services, to outline the voting process to you before the poll is conducted.
Thank you, Chairman. This poll is being conducted on resolutions 2 and 4A through to 4H. The persons entitled to vote on this poll are all shareholders, representatives and attorneys of shareholders and proxy holders who hold yellow admission cards. If you are here in more than one of those capacities, you will have been issued with as many yellow admission cards as you have separate capacities. If you are a proxy holder, a white summary of the votes to which you are entitled has been attached to the yellow admission card. Where you have been directed to cast votes for and or against the resolutions, the sheet indicates the number of votes you have been directed to so vote. It also shows any open votes which may be cast at your discretion. If you only have directed votes, you do not need to mark your yellow cards in relation to these votes, as they have already been captured by the share registry, in which case you need do nothing other than submit the voting paper. Votes at your discretion or open votes are shown in the column titled Votes Open on your proxy summary and can be cast at your discretion. Please indicate how you wish to vote your open votes by marking the appropriate square on your proxy holder voting card. According to the procedures which I will now go through for completing the voting papers for this poll. Shareholders and proxy holders are reminded that as there are more candidates for this election than there are board vacancies, you can only vote for up to 3 of the 8 candidates nominated in resolutions 4A to 4H. If you mark more than 4 boxes for resolutions 4A to 4H, your entire vote on those resolutions will be invalid. On the front of each card is the ballot for the resolutions. Shareholders and proxy holders with open votes may vote for or against the resolution as you wish. You may also abstain from voting if you wish. Please indicate on your card how you wish to vote by marking the appropriate box for or against or abstain. If you have any problems, Link Market Services staff are here to assist. Please indicate if you require any assistance. When you have finished filling in your voting paper, please place it in the ballot boxes, which Link Market Services staff will bring around the room. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ros. So we'll just spend some time now ensuring we just go through that process. Better do it myself. Okay. I'm just going to ask, have all persons who intended to vote now voted? It appears as though the voting process has been completed. I therefore declare the polls closed. Whilst the results of the polls for both the changes to the Constitution and the election of directors are concluded by Link Market Services, I will now adjourn this meeting for a break. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have refreshments outside, and I invite you to join with members of the AWI team until we come back in. Thank you. On here? Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming back in. Apologies for any delay or inconvenience that might have caused to anyone. This year we of course took the additional precaution of having an independent scrutineer, as I announced earlier. I will now address the resolution regarding changes to the Constitution. I will now address the result of agenda item 2, the changes. The votes are as follows. The for 272,375. The against 43,959. And abstain 20,781, which is 86% for the changes to the Constitution and 13.9% against. I declare this resolution carried. In relation to the election of directors, I will now address the result of agenda item 4, the election of directors. I am informed by Link Market Services that the 3 candidates for election with the highest number of votes for their election as a director of AWI board are Michelle Humphreys, David Webster and Noel Henderson. I declare Dr. Humphreys, Mr. Webster and Mr. Henderson to be elected as directors of the company, and their appointment to the board will take effect immediately. I congratulate all 3 of them. I'd like to welcome our 2 new directors to the AWI board. One of the strengths of AWI... We're just waiting for those results to come up. I didn't look.
Oh, there they are now. Sorry.
The results are up on the screen. I welcome our 2 new directors to the AWI board. One of the great strengths of AWI is its democratic model, that it gives you, its shareholders, a say in both the direction of the company and the makeup of the board. I know that each one of our new directors is passionate about the Australian wool industry and, like your fellow directors, is absolutely committed to AWI's mission of supporting wool growers. Together you bring a diverse set of skills and experiences to the board, along with fresh ideas and insights, and we look forward to working with you. Please join me in welcoming both Dr. Humphreys and Mr. Henderson to the board. To Wal, thank you for your long service to AWI and to the Australian wool industry. As a director and past chairman of AWI, Wal has left an indelible legacy. He has been a tireless, selfless and passionate advocate for wool growers and the industry. Today, our industry is so much stronger and sustainable thanks to the long leadership and strong leadership of Wal Merriman. It was Wal who engaged the industry with the great brands and great retail markets. It was his vision that has ensured wool is a valuable, considered and appreciated fibre by the fashion houses and the consumers of the world. At a personal level, I will miss his contributions to AWI and to the board. Please join me in thanking Wal Merriman for his extraordinary service to this company and to this industry. To the candidates who are not successful, thank you again for putting yourselves forward, demonstrating your commitment to the wool industry. As I mentioned earlier, we are always open to input, and I hope that we will be able to draw on your insights and experiences in other ways. This concludes the business of the meeting. I now close the 2019 Annual General Meeting of Australian Wool Innovation Limited, and I thank you for your attendance, both for those that have come personally and of course for those online. The meeting is now closed. Thank you.